All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Here in the Northwest, good afternoon. If you're listening from somewhere else, good day. Glad to be here. For those of you just joining us, my name's Kareem Candy. This is our very special guest, Marina Albero, and this is our weekly live stream series that we do, both an interview and a performance. And today we're here at the Museum of Glass. We're always, the third Sunday of every month, we're always doing the performance and the interview here at the Museum of Glass. So happy to be here. We apologize about last week. There were some last-minute technical difficulties that didn't allow us to do the live stream from Bainbridge Island, but the music was great nonetheless, and hope that those of you that were able to join us live enjoy the music. But today, like I said, we're very lucky to have Marina Albero with us here. And so how this works, if you're not familiar, is we'll do the interview for about 45 minutes, and then the last chunk of the interview, the 15 minutes, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask of myself or Marina, please feel free to let us know. You can either write that in the comments if you're here online, or to our people here live, you can just let us know live, and that'll work out fine too. So, Marina.
Hi, Kareem.
Hello, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, our pleasure. So I would like to know, what got you started in music? I mean, you play piano, you write, you teach, you tour, do lots of different things, wear many different hats, but what got you started in music when you first began?
Well, it's just my family trait in my case. So I don't remember how it started or when it started. It's just been part of my daily life. We would have gigs or busk on the streets every weekend, all day. Some weekends we would have 4, 5, 6 gigs because we were like a street band, and you could have a parade in the morning and another lunchtime, or a popular outdoors lunch, and then we would play for the kids afternoon and another parade at night with the fire or whatever. We were working a lot. So I don't remember. My mom and my dad would have some instruments on stage, some of them to be played, some of them just like their props, almost props. And apparently that's how I started, just picking up a little xylophone and an accordion, and they were, okay, Marina can play anything. And it's kind of what I felt at that time. Music was natural.
Yes. Well, and for those that don't know, we've talked a little bit about this prior, but where did you grow up?
I was born in Barcelona, in Spain, and then quickly they took me to the countryside, and they raised me there. I'm one of 6 siblings, 4 of us living always together, so I was the oldest of the 4. So it's been a really country life with lots of touring. So in a way, we lived in a very quiet place, but we were all day on the road. And then Barcelona, I went back for studies when I was older, and it's like where my grandma lives. It's my hometown.
So your parents were musicians. Did they teach you how to play, or was it just more intuitive and they just let you kind of play by ear and, like you said, play what you felt? And
yeah, more like that. Especially my dad. My dad was more of a he studied philosophy and literature, so he was more a poet, beautiful singer, and he was on the movement of the protest singing in Spain when Franco, the last days of Franco, the dictator. So my father was more of a thinking person, speaking person, singing. My mom was the one that went to the Conservatory and studied music, and she was the one trying for all of us to at least learn how to read music and play whatever she needed in the band, whatever part she would say, you need to. So my mom was there, but they gave to everybody at my place formal, traditional conservatory lessons. We all went to music school, so yeah.
Well, I know you teach many students, and I've taught for a while too, and I'm sure you see where I'm curious. When you try and teach your own kids something, it's different than teaching other people's kids. So when your parents were trying to teach you, did it go well, or was it kind of like,
No.
I don't want to do this?
No. My mom, though, she was really humble about it. So she was pretty aware that she was the first connection with it, but she would quickly sign us up for formal lessons again. She knew. And she always feels like we quickly learn faster than she did. Which I guess in a way, you know how kids are, no? So in my opinion, when my kids were growing up, I always thought, I'm not going to teach them anything, because I remember my daughter Serena learning by ear the Bach Minuet from the keyboard. The keyboard would play it, and she was like playing it along. And there was one note that she played wrong, and I said from the kitchen, it's a D. And she's like, I know it. So I said, okay, that's one and no more. But they had also classical music education for the whole, how is it, like the K-12 school. Both had classical music every day and choir and solfege. So both my kids, I wanted for them to know how to speak in music, communicate in music. Yeah, and now both are musicians. So
And so this was prior, because you've been here now in Seattle for 6
almost
years?
6.
Okay,
Yeah,
so this
6
was
years.
prior, was this in Spain, in
Yes.
Barcelona, that your kids had this
Yes.
education? Good,
Yes.
good, good. Okay, well, going back to you, so your parents were musicians, you're playing by ear, having a little bit of training from your mom. Were there, aside from your family, which seemed like they were a strong influence, were there other musicians once you started getting into music that you really admired and kind of wanted to learn from or model your playing after?
Yeah, well, there's a tipping point. Of course, when I'm growing up, there's a couple of teachers that were really important to me. That you keep them close to your heart. And with one of them, she's probably 85 now, and we just had a Skype a couple of months ago, and that was one of the most beautiful things. She keeps trying to see where I am, and she writes me emails. She, for example, was the door to me to the Catalan classical music. I love that one composer, especially Frederic Mompou. And she was the one opening that door to me. There's these moments in your life as a musician where you see something that, okay, that's amazing. I want to live there for a while. And she was one of them. But also, I would say going to Cuba, because I went there and lived and studied in Cuba for 3 years between my 15 and 18 years old. So as you can imagine, that was like the most intense musical experience I've ever had. It was 24/7. Everybody was practicing and playing and hanging out with music all day. All my friends were musicians. The competitivity we had was 1,000% musical. There were not such a thing like big gigs to take from anyone. It's an amazing environment for music students. Then they speak in Spanish. And I was there for classical music. And they have all this Russian pedagogy that my teachers would spend 5 years in Moscow and get their degree there. So it's a really solid music school in Cuba, plus the traditional music. So to me, that experience, that's when I started I had my biggest idols by my side all day. Like people from 12 years old to 90 years old, everybody being generous about the information, a smile. The way they make me feel music there, it was tough coming back to reality then. I still live out of these memories.
Going back to Spain from Cuba? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you would say, if I understand you correctly, that the music scene and the academia while you were in Cuba was more of an open giving thing than it was in Barcelona at that time?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. That's why I want to know. So.
For the first time, I remember in Spain being able to read everything and understand. I had perfect pitch, so I could see the notes when I would hear anything, okay? And I started feeling going to music school like my wings were being cutting off. And it's really frustrating. Or you're trying to compose or play something, and teachers would say, no, not now or not. Of course, I had these 2 or 3 super cool teachers there that's why I kept going. But when I get to Cuba and my teacher says, no, my goal is that you're going to become better than I am. I'm like, wait a minute. Think that I go to Cuba with a big level of understanding in theory and big experience on stage, and I have a problem in my hands that I cannot play certain stuff that I know I should be able to. And my teacher there said, Marina, are you willing to start from zero? And I was like on a 6th or 7th year of my classical piano. And I said to her, oh, yeah. I came here to, I really want to play well. So I started from scratch at that point, from zero, only putting my hand on the keyboard, up and down. And in 4 months, I understood every single part of my finger, arm, hand, elbow, what am I using. I've never got injured when I had injuries before going to Cuba. Also, it's not Cuba, it's the teacher I had. It's always like Teresa Junco was my angel there, and then her student, Yvette Frontela, who is now in Barcelona. The way you understand the technique, the instrument, the music, it's so I would say, in your body and in your mind, not only like instruction. Oh, 2 plus 2, 4. No. There is a process, there is an understanding, there is a one muscle by muscle. I got that in Cuba, which people, they think I got the tumbao and the Latin music. I never really went to a Latin music or a traditional Cuban music lesson. I just hang out with them. I was dancing and playing music. My studies were classical in percussion and piano, and I'm really grateful to them.
Yeah, no, this is interesting because we've hung out at clubs and played music, but we've never talked more than like 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like, hi, bye, sounds great, you know. So no, this is fascinating to me. So, and it's interesting because, you know, you growing up in Spain, we had Alexei Nikolaev a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about growing up in Russia and the big focus on classical and big focus on classical. And I know many of the people that helped develop jazz as we know it were very much into classical music or classically trained. So I think that's very important for people that don't really know about this music to learn and know and understand, because I think the classical conception with technique and learning how to play an instrument, master an instrument, and then also learn a good deal of theory to have an understanding. And certainly it helps if you have perfect pitch or developing relative pitch. All those things are very important if you want to be a spontaneous composer.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So, okay. So we were in Spain, Cuba, back to Spain. At that point, had jazz kind of come into your sphere of influence yet? Or?
Yeah. So the way jazz. So my mom and my dad were big jazz lovers, flamenco. I mean, I've been listening to Miles Davis or Weather Report or Lee Morgan or Bill Evans my whole life, along with flamenco like Camarón de la Isla, Paco de Lucía, Niña de los Peines. So my mom and my dad had a pretty wide musical taste. My mom was used to have they had the whole jazz festival in Barcelona. My grandma and my grandpa would take the 4 kids, which is pretty rare in Spain at that time, to the jazz festival every year, almost every concert. So my mom got to see Miles Davis, got to see Dizzy Gillespie when she was growing up in Barcelona, which is, again, pretty unique. So yeah, I come from a musical family and also lovers of music. But the thing is that I was in love with percussion. I wanted to drum or something. So I insisted until I got my drum set. I was 12. And my drum teacher was a jazz drummer. I was lucky there too. He was such a sweetheart, Cesar. He's still playing in Spain. And he said to me, well, you can keep playing drums, and I think it's a cool idea, but I think you should be also taking jazz piano because you're an amazing musician. You play all these instruments and improvise on stage and you make melodies. And so I actually followed the advice of Cesar. I went to the beautiful piano player in Spain, Luis Escuadra, who is really local, but he's a big connoisseur of jazz. So while I was during the class, and I started at 14, 15 years old before I went to Cuba, we were doing the class while he was recording for me a tape. Remember, it's Spain, it's hard getting records. There's no YouTube, there's nothing. So he would always make a copy of a record with the tune we were working on. I would have to write down the musicians, where has been the year, the tracks, the titles, the composers, or I couldn't leave the lesson. So I had this person that was playing on stages, and he was a lover, and he's like, I think I had one of the best ways of introducing to jazz. He also made me understand that this was like an American art form, and for that reason, I mean, he was like, that's how I do it, that's what I understand, but we're not them, we don't even understand the lyrics. So he also made me aware of the big respect that you have to have when you approach other musics, which to me was natural. I've done it before with Moroccan music. I did it later with Cuban music. So to me, there's nothing more beautiful in my life than feeling like seduced by another music that I don't know of, that I don't have the key to it. I've been lucky enough that when that happened to me with flamenco and jazz, because I'm not a flamenco musician, I'm not a Latin musician, I'm not a classical musician, I'm not a jazz musician. I just happen to have been navigating music from these places. I love improvising, and jazz, it's kind of the only music that it's taught nowadays and that we have spread as a popular music where that happens in a regular basis. But I always say I don't believe in like improvisation belongs only to jazz music, because I've been doing it since I was born and I didn't know that jazz existed. So I'm a big defender of crossing a little bit these pathways. And if you are in a college and you are in a jazz major, you should be trying to cross with the early music and with the classical musicians, because that's when everything connects, actually. To me, the more I know of different musics, the more I see like the big picture of it. But of course, I know my limitations, and I only have one life. And I've never devoted myself to one style, to one instrument. You know, with music, I do like, to me, the thrill of trying out and not knowing each other and, you know, seeing what magically happens. It's bigger than me. And that's the only thing that I see that it's worth for me living life the way I do.
Definitely. Well, I want to go back. So when you mentioned drums, you mentioned piano, you mentioned other percussion instruments. So with your family, when you first started playing, what was the first instrument? You mentioned xylophone and
Well, my mom, she's a wind instrument, and she's done a really beautiful work with kind of musicology in a way, but not in a college, but on the street. So she went to little villages and learned how to play songs and learned how to play instruments that were forgotten. And she's one of a few in Spain that in the 80s started teaching all that to many, many community centers, small villages, and starting to restore the parade, big giants we have and all these things. So she has this amazing collection of instruments, and she has this amazing collection of tunes, and she needs somebody to play, you know, the set, yeah, the harmonies. So whatever she needed. It's like, first thing was this super loud double reed wind instruments, like loud. I have to say that in tuning aspects, we were the best band for sure, because my mom and I were like so I was lead of the second voice, and she was lead of the first voice. If there was not too much budget, it's only my mom, my dad, and I. If we have more budget, maybe we'll have 2-3 people in each voice. I mean, it depends. So I would play a lot of instruments like wind, bagpipes, flutes. This one is called gralla. And then, of course, my mom and my dad were more on the guitar side. I would start playing accordion, anything with keyboards or xylophones. To me, was always easy. Percussions. I played hurdy-gurdy for many years until I could get rid of that one. The tuning, that killed me. Like, I cannot play an instrument. I cannot have a control with the tuning, over the tuning. And then the hammer dulcimer appears in my life, shows up all of a sudden in Seattle when I'm 12. And that's one of these things that I have to stop and say something about it, because as soon as I set one foot in this city, I had a feeling like, oh my, I love it here. I want to live here. You know it. I'm 12 and I just know it. I'll live here one day. I don't know.
12 years old, you were in Seattle?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that, please.
That's my connection with Seattle, and that's why I come here later on. Somebody calls us in 1990, almost 92, before the Olympic Games, and asking my dad if he could do a theater play with a Seattle company and a Japanese company that wanted to come to the Olympic Games. They needed a band and an actor, and that was my dad and us. And also my dad had the connections with the Olympic Games cultural side. So yeah, we got into a theater there. So we had to come here for rehearsal. It's an interesting way of coming to Seattle. They had a beautiful production. It was one reel at the time. And so I came to Seattle. I was living in Queen Anne in a beautiful house. I went to Roosevelt for one day. Yeah, I was the happiest. I'm sure I saw some people I'm playing with now, but we didn't know each other at the time. So I don't know. I had a feeling. I loved it. It's my first city in U.S. I've been coming to U.S. forever since then. New York, San Francisco, Chicago. I've been in many places, but Seattle, I was like, I like it. What happens in Seattle is that we have some free time, and what do we do, musicians, with free time? You go and check out local music. You go and check out music stores. It's like so nerdy. we get into dusty strings. And my dad was like, oh my gosh, all these guitars and banjos and mandolins. He was like, in heaven. My mom went to the whistle, you know? And I saw the hammer and dulcimer right there with the couple hammers. I'm like, oh, that's my dream come true. This is percussion and strings. So I've never seen any other instrument like that. I remember seeing one when I was little in this festival. You know, you've seen it, but I've never actually had the power in my hands. This woman, super cool, Connie, came and introduced me to the instrument, said, look, this is the C, 1, 2, 3, 4, other side, major scale is diatonic. I'm like, that's easy. So I started playing right away. I'm like, diatonic, come on, Karim. You know, I'm like, okay, that's easy. And my mom and my dad turned their heads around and said, we're taking one to Spain. And you know what I said? I said, nope, thank you. I'm already playing 17 instruments. You keep complaining that I don't practice every day. I don't want one more to add to the list. Yes. And we left, we didn't take it. And when the company came, my father called them and said, bring her one. I think that's for her. So my dad and I got to the agreement that I was never going to practice that instrument, that I would only play it and have fun with it. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was suffering quite a lot by then at the Conservatory, feeling like this disconnection with the music, how I understand and I feel it. And when I would take the hammer and dulcimer, I knew that not even my dad would say anything about it. And I always say on the hammer and dulcimer, I make no mistakes because nobody told me what's right and wrong. So thanks, Dusty Strings and Seattle for that hammer and dulcimer. Then I got into the culture of it in Spain and Europe, which is really beautiful. It's a medieval instrument for me. There's a lot of literature about it, even a book in Catalan from the 15th century. There is a beautiful history coming from Persia, where your family comes from, which is something that I have this idea that one day I'll go and I'll learn something about Persian music, because that's where the santur, the original, comes from. And it hasn't been altered so much. It's just the tuning of it. So I like the whole geographical, historical, like beautiful palette that all of a sudden I was offered with. So you can transcribe music from Afghanistan, flamenco, early music. I've played lots of early music in Europe, in Paris and Brussels. So I've been in the early music for a few years, like actively working there. And they would hire me to improvise in early music, which was also a pleasure. You know, you get there with hammer and dulcimer, and I mean, it's been a whole trip, a whole journey with the hammer and dulcimer. I'm really grateful, and the whole circle comes back when I move back to Seattle, and I'm here, and I can go with my hammer and dulcimer. Do you have some replacements? And talk nerdy stuff at the store. It feels really good.
Well, I'm curious, you mentioned the classical conservatory. Now, was it your choice? Did you want to go study classical music at conservatory,
No.
or were your parents kind of like, this is something you need to do?
It wasn't such a big deal for nobody there. You know what I mean? You just do it. It wasn't I knew I wasn't going to be a classical performer. Everybody knew at home. It's like the only thing we had in Spain at the time, a music degree, was the classical one. You had no other choice. There was no degree for jazz, no degree for early music, no degree for any other thing than classical. As soon as I started doing more jazz and stuff, they put these certificates out that nobody remembers in Spain now. I think I am they had like 3 levels, and just 3 levels. I was on the second as a technique and música moderna, and it was with the drums. So my jazz, whatever I have from there, it's on drums. I'm from a really weird generation in Spain. They call us the gap generation between the dictatorship, and we are the first kids on democracy growing up, first kids able to learn and be taught in Catalan at school. So everything was like they were experimenting with us, a big deal, yeah.
All right. Well, so I'm curious, you were doing stuff with family. You're going to school, and I'm assuming you had your own circle of friends. Did you do any gigging with your own kind of bands or putting projects together?
Well,
or
that's when I
solo,
come
or?
back from Cuba. Remember that I go to Cuba with 15 years old? I was offered to play on a different band, drums, when I was 12 or 13, but I didn't have a car or, not even any chance to get a car. So I didn't take that gig. No, when I come back from Cuba, actually before I decided to really come back, my dad produced a big band from Cuba, and I was playing on it. We put together a beautiful salsa band. And the first year we were like 12 people. The second year we were only like 6. And then I moved back to Spain or whatever. Then we were like 4 or 5 quartet. I started gigging with that. I also started gigging with my own Marina Albero, Little Things trio. So that's when I started getting more into jazz festivals, local music there. It's true that right away I had my first baby when I come back to Spain. That means that I moved close to my mom and my dad. I mean, I had my baby when I was 20 years old, and I come back from Cuba 18 years old. So, you know, I kind of went family-oriented. I had a bunch of students in my place. I would be breastfeeding and teaching students, like super. Oh, yeah, I mean, countryside in Spain, it was so beautiful. So I had all these years raising my kids, which was a little bit slower, and I decided, I realized that I was young, and my mom and my dad would tell me, hey, leave the kids here, which I would do, and I had gigs and stuff, but I did want to be with them. I want to raise them. So it's when Marcel is like 4 years old, I started getting into early music, and then my scope is more in Europe, Barcelona, a little bit of Spain, but it was happening more in the north, taking planes with the hammer and dulcimer and stuff. Then back to Spain, and with my ex-partner, with Chano, he's a great musician. We did work a lot together. I did a lot of work with him. So things like, of course, being part of a band with him and playing. He plays piano, so it was hard for me having a space in that band. I would play vibes, I would play synth, and I would play hammer and dulcimer, helping a lot with the orchestral work he did or we did together. So that was exciting for me, getting into the more flamenco jazz. What my ex has, to me, really important, and I don't really like talking about my exes at all, but this is musical. And I think it's important to say what he has done, because I say that Chano Dominguez is the perfect bridge between flamenco and jazz. He made these two musics meet at a really beautiful point. He's able to take the blues into the flamenco rhythms, making a lot of sense for both ends, for the American musicians and the flamenco singer. And this is something that, you know, now many people, they do a lot in Spain. Like almost every musician in Spain knows how to play bulería blues or flamenco, or they take a jazz standard and they put it in a flamenco rhythm. But when he started, nobody was doing that. I mean, yeah, Miles Davis did a beautiful job with Jill Evans, but you know that these things are like, one here, one there. And he starts more, I mean, it's him and all the people that used to play with Paco de Lucia, who many of them would come from jazz and rock. And in the 80s, they start mixing it in that way. I mean, now it's a style, you know. And so being close to that for 15 years, even though I was working less, I actually learn a lot and write a lot of music with him, which has been super richful. Then I've played with lots of flamenco singers on my own, flamenco dancers. I've written music for ballet, for flamenco. So it's an interesting, another door coming back home and connecting with your roots music. You have so many in Spain. So that's been my last thing before I came back, or I came to Seattle to stay, let's say.
Well, that's makes me wonder, having such strong roots from Spain and from Cuba, and with your ex and that influence, and coming here to Seattle, which you're heavily involved in the jazz scene now, and the music scene in general at large, because you do lots of different things. I'm curious, I'm not that well versed in if there's much of a flamenco scene in Seattle. Is there much of one? And if it is, what's your opinion about it coming from
There's
your
not
background?
many. There's not many, and it's, I mean, there's not many Spanish people. There's not many Cuban people in this area. It's just that it's so different for us. I think the Spanish came here and they said, okay, I cannot bear with the Northwest. I mean, I get it. It's hard for us.
The Spanish said, we cannot conquer this area.
No. And it's the clouds. It's nothing else. Like, oh, no, where is the sun? Bye. So I would say that probably that's one of the reasons. It's not on our way. It's really far away. In another I would say people who makes it here happen, they really love it. It's really passion. I would highlight Ernesto and Encarnacion. These guys are really doing a beautiful, beautiful job. They go to Spain and they are involved there and they come here. I mean, I'm really happy that people spread my culture more than I do, because I'm not a flamenco musician and I don't play guitar, Spanish guitar. I play piano. I write my music. So I have not only respect, but big admiration, and it makes me happy seeing that people around the world keep that alive. And of course, I mean, again, if I was really flamenco, maybe I would be more involved. I think the fact that I write my music, it's what keeps me in the jazz scene, or I don't know, I kind of naturally, I'm more involved in the jazz scene, and I believe it's because of my improvisation or improvisational approach and my writing, and the musicians I like to play with, because I do need flexible musicians with me, and jazz musicians are flexible. I mean, or they're not just musicians to me, you know.
Well, I remember this is like later 90s, early 2000s, and I remember talking with Thomas Marriott about this and other musicians as well that were involved in that kind of sphere. There was a very strong Brazilian scene and a very strong Cuban scene, and a lot of it hinged around nightlife and dancing. And one of the big ones was Latin Expression, which I think was like a 13-piece big band. You know? And it's hard to pay bands with that many musicians, you know, well. But at the time, there was a big craze for it, and there was, I think, the Century Ballroom had, you know, dancing and things of that nature. I could certainly see room for it. I think it's always going to boil down to the finances, right? But I think all that type of stuff, particularly because there's so much dancing involved in the culture of it, I think that's the allure of it to audiences. And I think, well, right now things are kind of, you know, with the pandemic, not so awesome, but hopefully we can get back to that. That would be great, because I remember it's just a big part of the scene and of the culture of not just this area, but helping people learn about other cultures outside of where they just grew up.
Well, and dancing, it's, to me, for example, I'm a musician, but I always say that more than playing, I like dancing to the music. But I like it 1,000% more if it's a live band. So going back to the culture of music and live music, let's just think about jazz. When is that jazz gets popular and people get really excited about it and they know about it? It's because it's a dancing thing. And I'm okay. Look, I've been many years on the classical scene, and it's cool that nowadays we are able to sit down and intellectually wait and watch a concert and enjoy that. But that's pretty recent. We have to remember that we cannot lose like the body connection to the music. And it's cool having educated audience able to do that and recognize a solo and recognize a sonata and not clap between movements, which I don't think is a big deal. But you know what I mean? I understand you can go nerd in stuff up until a point, and with art it can be beautiful because it just gets like richer and richer and richer. But also, if something doesn't move me, if it has no swing, no duende, we have a word in each, you know, whatever that means to you. If it doesn't have soul, if it doesn't touch you, it can be played the fastest, it can be the most complicated, doesn't move me, doesn't serve me. So to me, music and dancing to the music, you'll see me in concerts, and even when I play, my body is moving. I cannot understand. I still don't understand because I cannot do it, like sitting still to certain music. I'm like, you have to tie me up. Just moves me.
Yeah. Right on. All right. Well, I'm curious then, since moving here to the United States, to Seattle and living here, you've been heavily involved in the scene, but you also still go out and tour and do other things. With the pandemic, I mean, you still seem to be pretty active. I know you've started not house concerts, but online. There's online things that you do. Can you talk a little bit about the things that you've been doing over the past year?
Of course. Well, at the beginning of pandemic, I did. I had the feeling that was big. So that's when I did the quarantine sessions, which to me, the first one, I picked that name. I was only going to do one, trying to get some of the money that I already got canceled back. It was out of desperation. Then I got a couple of sponsorships, like Stone Gosser says, $1,000, Marina, for you. And I felt that was unfair, that just give it for me. Irshad gave me 300, and I'm like, okay, I think we could do 3 nights with that, and selling tickets, and blah, 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 and we'll have a video, and so we did it. The first one I did, lockdown started that very night after the concert. I went to a bar for the last time in a year. And so after that, we did 2 more weeks. Things started, going fast, mask, blah, 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 careful, airborne. After 3, we took a break. The beautiful thing was the women around. When I called different people who actually showed up, it ended up all being women, all of them women of color or immigrants. So we ended up being a really curious and beautiful group of women, really powerful, each one of them with a personal and a living career. So I told them, do you want to do it again? They said, yeah, let's do it again. We did it in May. In between the 1 and the 2 in May that we had already programmed, it's when the killing, the murder of George Floyd happens. And so me being the one like calling to the studio to listen that, I said to all the women, hey, how do you feel? And especially because they are Black American women. And I'm like, I'm not even from here. I am super sad. I am blocked. I don't know what to do. I'm in shock. And they said, we want to do it, and we want to give the money to Black Lives Matter. So instead of selling tickets on that one, we did it in the open. It's actually on YouTube. It's interesting because right before that happens, the first one, and this on May were called dialogues. And what we were trying to do more than a concert where you listen and, oh, clap, 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 you're so cool. We wanted to have a conversation with and that was May, almost 6 months after, or 3 months after pandemic. We all were like suffering so much of isolation, mental health. We had this uncertainty about future job. It was pretty bad. So we call it dialogues. And between the first and the second, which had like 10 days gap, all this happens. And we were like, oh my, what do we do now? I'm really proud of these women. To me, just saying that they were there for me right after pandemic, I have no family here. So at the end of the day, I know many, many people, but who is there for you? And looking around and seeing my sisters in that way, or how they wanted me to feel this way, I'm just sorry I don't have more energy to put more of this together, because I have to really look after my microcosmos. To me, just paying my bills, it's super challenging now. It's always been, but in this country. But this year it's been like super uncertain. So I'm not really able to put together too much. I don't have a partner. I have a house with my kids. It's a lot of handling, but I wish and I will do more. We did it again in October and November. We did a circle where everybody could see everybody with more musicians. So I'm always down for a gathering. I think we're nothing alone. I think music, the way it's understood, needs to be redesigned. The experience for the musicians, the experience for the audience, the interaction, and the meaning or the purpose of music and concerts. I would like to ask everybody in the other side of the screen and here, how many days have you been with no music in your life at all? I would say none. So whose fault is it that it's or is not considered, I don't like even say it's a job. This is a service we are giving. And I know my biggest enemy is my passion. I know my biggest enemy is that my friends and I just want to see each other and make music. But I am also asking for a little bit of responsibility from everyone, first from ourselves. Because I have 2 kids and both are pursuing a career in music, and now I feel like, oh, I should have told them, or didn't they see me? So just changing a little bit, the philosophy and thinking we are giving a service. It's something people need. And hopefully, I wish for everyone to have a job that you love, because then the world will be a better place for sure. And that's what I want as a mom. What do you want for your kids? I want them to be happy. I don't care with whom, doing what, if they are not harming anyone. I want people to be doing what they like. And so why do I have to feel bad about it or think that it's okay, give me this, okay, no, it's thank you. No. But well, it's, again, first, it's me changing the way I present myself, I guess.
Well, I know we have a mutual friend and a champion in the music industry for musicians, Nate Omdahl. you know, I know we've all talked in various conversations about these types of things, and it's interesting. I think we all love music. I think we all hate with a passion the music business and the music. You know, it's ridiculous. And the thing is, back in the day with unions, there was a lot more power. There was a lot more protections, and we still have a music union, but it's not. And I'm not bad mouthing it at all, but it's not nearly as able to help musicians as it was.
I thought
back
you were
in the
doing
day.
better here. In Spain,
Yeah.
there's no such a thing. I mean, you had a union here in 1936, I believe, when we had the Civil War, we were killing each other. So to me, I thought, okay, they have a union. And I came here, I went to the union, and they quickly told me the situation. They explained it to me, and it makes sense. So we are self-employees. How can you put a union together of self-employees? I mean, unless you have an employee, then an employer, I mean, then you can actually say, okay, we're a union. But number one, musicians and artists are hard to unite. So again, it starts on us. And the union is there. I'm sure if we go, and when I've gone there, they always help me. They always open to it. So I would say we have to just let them know how is the situation. You know.
Well, and I think, like I said, I'm not bad mouthing the union here at all.
No,
All I'm
sure.
saying is, it was a much different situation being a member of the musicians union in the 1940s versus what it is now in 2021. And I'm hoping that it can get back to that point again. So the other thing that I find interesting is in a country like France, like we've talked with musicians from there, and they've talked about they have a remittance where the government subsidizes you're probably aware of this, subsidizes the clubs and subsidizes the musicians. So I don't see why we would not be able to do that here in the United States. It seems like a great idea.
Yeah, when I was there working quite a lot, and they were saying, well, first of all, that makes many lazy musicians. And so what's going on in France, when I was there, they would say they are looking down to Spain, south to Spain, saying, oh, they're making it work there. Why are we doing Look at the musicians in Spain. They don't need that money. So, yeah, so there is something here again. I understand that culture has to be subsidized, and there are certain stuff we want to like preserve, and we have to take care, like we do with nature. There are certain animals that are already almost killed completely and extinct, so we have to take care of these things. Cool. But when you know the numbers that the music business makes in Washington State, and you see the number that end up on the hands of a musician, so that's when you say something is wrong here. It feels like in many other businesses in this big new world where there's money in one side to fix the whole spectrum, and that's not going to happen. So I don't know, that's one thing in one way. Where is that money? Where does that go? What is the legislation that makes any agreement legal? They can take as much money as they want from me. I just have to sign. It's like with the devil. The musicians, we are used to sign whatever paper comes, you sign, and so you have tonight the gig. So that's one. But the other one, again, I would go back to the service. Making it sustainable, it's also a goal. Making live music appreciated, making people realize that they need music every day and that is happening right now in your city, in your community. That these guys are the ones that can teach your son or can, it's just being aware that we belong and that music is a really big part of human existence. I believe it. It's not, again, everything has music underneath.
I have a feeling this could take the rest of the time of the interview. And I want to open this up to questions, but I want to ask this because I know you have strong opinions and experiences about this, which is why I'm thrilled to have you as a guest today. I want to talk to you. Oh, hang on one second. Yes, there are questions. Okay, we'll get to the questions. I want to ask this question first, though. In your experience, being an immigrant to the United States, being a woman, being a musician, can you talk about, from your perspective, what that looks like and how difficult that must be? Because I know just being a musician is hard enough. But can you talk a little bit about that?
It is. And there's been many times in my life in Seattle when I've been on stage having a really hard time in my life. And it's funny, you think sometimes, how much do they need to know? How much is fair for them, for the audience, because I'm so grateful that they're there. I don't want to give them bad vibe, or so usually I keep it for myself. I think I've survived, and I think no, I've survived thanks to 3 or 4 people at a time. Really, people that show up like family. Being a woman, not having credit records, not having a real job. You come here, you don't have. I mean, I had Zinzani, which I love them. These are the One Real people, the all One Real people. They have Zinzani, and I was working there for 6 months. So at least I knew that 6 months I was going to survive. But it's been a, I don't know how to describe it. It's been really wild. And being single, it's been really wild. And being a mom of 2 teenagers alone, I don't even want to start. You know what I mean? It's been a whole trip. Sitting here right now today, I look back and I tell that to my kids the whole time. It's like, we are better than a year ago, much better than 2 years ago. So I'm really grateful to settle in America. I've suffered a lot, but I'm still here. They gave me a green card just for being an artist. They've protected me in Seattle this year. A little bit. I mean, you know, I had to do my little things here and there, but I got a couple grants now. I got a little unemployment since October. So, you know, I feel like my efforts here are a little bit. And then the most important thing, I'm playing my music. I'm seen by the community. So when I have these tough moments and I feel so helpless, because I know it would be different if I was a man, or it would be different if I was from here, I really decide to turn towards the positive, because it's so much. There's so much love around me. I'm so grateful. I'm still here. I don't want to leave to Spain. So it would be unfair now highlighting the bad experiences. But yes, it's been super tough. If you tell me in advance that I had to go through certain stuff, maybe I would have said, you know what, I'll stay here with my mom and chill. But now I look back and I see my kids and I see, it's thank you, Seattle. Thank you. Thank you, community.
One more aside to that question is just being a woman musician in Spain and as a student in Cuba and now as a professional band leader. I mean, what do you think? Well, I guess it's a broad. I mean,
What
there's so
do I
many directions.
think? I think that I miss women in the scene. I think that I miss women on the jazz festivals, headlining, not only singing. I think that the new school and other colleges should have better programs for vocalists and not mistreat them like they're not instrumentalists. I can keep going. I mean,
know, and
with
yeah.
this thing, we are starting. And I just can say thank you to the women who made it before us, because otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here. But the way I made it here, it's shut up your mouth, be nice, smile, and try to get the next gig. I haven't been an activist in that because I had to pay my bills. But yeah, everything that you have heard about artists, musicians, Me Too's, it's all true. And it's still happening to younger people. So yes, there's a lot to talk about, and we have to be aware.
Yeah, and I was going to say your experiences with the new school. It's you have with your daughter, and plenty
That's
of
the
things
thing.
to talk
Now
about.
it's a little more strong, you know. When it's about me, like, I can just put it under the rug. When it's about your daughter, it's like, oh, wait a minute.
We need another 2 hours to discuss. I knew that question. I should have started with that question. I'm sorry. All right, so we have questions. What are some questions? Hang on.
Let's read it.
The question is from our friend Michael Smolker.
Hey,
Question
Michael.
from Marina. Marina, I recall you're saying rehearsals are for cowards. I always took that to be sort of tongue-in-cheek, not completely serious. I wonder if you could comment on that, though. What
Yes.
exactly did you mean, and what is the
Yes.
role of rehearsal? Is the proper balance to keep it fresh?
That's a flamenco phrase. I heard this phrase in flamenco environments. Flamenco people like the moment so much, the present time. So maybe you're like 20 minutes from calling, and they are at the bar of the theater or something, you know, and you're like, come on, guys, or sound check. And they say that this kind of stuff. Rehearsal is for ensayar es de cobardes. It's not a personal approach. I actually love rehearsing. Like, I love it. but my rehearsals imply food. Even the other day, Jeff Bush came and it was badminton and food and play. So the rehearsal to me, it's bonding and it's hanging. Not so much just the brain working. So yes, I love rehearsals and I love them long so we can hang and drink and eat and and play music maybe.
Wonderful. It looks like that's the only one here online. Any questions from our audience at this time? Yes.
I don't think I remember my very first instrument. My mom and my dad told me that apparently were the xylophone that was on stage, and I believe it because I'm in love with marimbas, and I would love having a big, big house with all these percussion, classical percussion things. Probably that was my call. Yeah, xylophone. My favorite what? Instrument to play right now? It's an interesting question. I go by days. Lately, piano has been good. Some days I hate the piano, and then it's true. And when I feel like that, I have the drum set by the piano, and there's a really good cook in Spain. We have many, but there's one, Carme Ruscalleda. She's like super, super little. She's a super busy woman. I love her. And she says that she has a drum set by the kitchen. And it's one of these restaurants like 5 stars Michelin and all that. So she gets stressed or whatever, and she has a little room, soundproof, and comes back. Drums, yeah. Drums when things go wrong.
Any other questions from our live audience or our online audience? I'm going to keep barraging Marina with questions here. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm curious, because I know you're associated a lot with piano. I mean, you play a lot of piano and you do a lot of composing. Just speaking in the realm of jazz, which in 2021 means a lot of things to a lot of people, when you started doing a lot of piano, you mentioned Bill Evans. Who were some other piano players that were influences for you?
Bill Evans is one of the main, for some reason. There's something in his clean playing that I can see everything he plays. You know, it's to me, it's visually even was like, whoo, I could see everything. I love Monk because of how unpredictable he is. Monk makes me laugh. You know, I'm listening to his music, and all the time I'm like, you know, it just makes me laugh, and that's priceless. And I like it because he's really percussive as well. So these two as piano players, to me, were like super right there. Then people like Chick Corea, of course, and Herbie Hancock, for all his... Herbie Hancock, of course, I was crazy about the 70s. I thought that was like the coolest music I've ever heard for the longest time. So, yeah, I'm pretty straightforward. And then also, I had a lot of other music in my life at that time. So I was in love with Chopin, and I was in love with Debussy. And so my mixtapes were pretty crazy, actually. And then salsa, Cuban, super, super aggressive Cuban salsa, you know. So my mixtapes were like only for me.
Well, I'm curious. You said your grandparents took the siblings to festivals and things. So when you were young, were there any jazz musicians that you saw, any performances that really stuck out in your mind?
It's really interesting. When I was really little, apparently it was the first jazz workshop, international jazz workshop, that they've been doing for 40 years now. And Tad Jones was on the very first one. And that happened not in Barcelona, but in this little small town where my mom and my dad were, because they were always organizing things. And apparently Tad Jones came with his family. And he had a little boy that was my age. So that's my first experience meeting, apparently, a jazz musician. Then after that, I actually don't remember going so much to concerts. I've been my whole life gigging. So when festivals were happening, I had gigs for the longest time. So no, I don't remember that much until I go to New York, and then I go to see Chick Corea or to see John Scofield. Later on in Spain, when I come back from Cuba, I also play in bigger jazz festivals with Chano, and I saw John McLaughlin, or I saw even Paco de Lucia. So I did get to see them, I would say, older, in my 20s, when in Barcelona and New York. Took me a while.
We're close to the end here. So are there any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, cool. Now, Marina, I know you do a lot of teaching and all that kind of, you have a website, all that kind of stuff. If someone wanted to study with you and learn about any stuff about the music that you talk about, how could they go about doing that?
marinaalbero.net. And there's a scheduling page and everything, so you can even book without talking to me if you don't want, or you can write me and we can have a first, a little, meet and greet. But yeah, I'm open, and of course I do it online for now, but I expect for, in person to be back maybe in the summer. That would be nice, because there's many people that said, I don't like Zoom. So soon enough, we'll be able to see each other. But anyhow, you can already go to the website. And to support me, musically speaking, I like sending people to my Patreon page. I'm only posting once a month, like charging once a month. And I'm posting always something exclusive that it's nowhere else, which means the library is already pretty huge. And yeah, it's only there. And you can start as little as $1 per month. And that's been really cool, because I make something new every month. I release something new. That's really, really cool. And Bandcamp, like everybody else. Bandcamp at least goes, it's better than iTunes and all these streaming platforms. So you'll find me marinaalbero.net. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, well, the last question I always like to ask all our guests is, here we are in 2021. You've had all these wonderful experiences, great teachers. You've been all over the world performing. If you were going to give advice to people that are considering becoming a musician, what's something that you've learned that you think is invaluable and important information that anyone that's going to undertake being a musician should consider?
That everybody has their own voice. Don't forget about that. Doesn't matter how high is your level. You can always make music. I've seen 2 years old making music. So we tend to lose it or think that, the goal is super far away, and music can be always more complicated and can be always something more to learn. But at the same time, with only the black keys on the piano, you can play a blues. And that power is rhythm, having rhythm, which takes me again to dancing. Don't hesitate to dance. Don't hesitate to sing. Don't hesitate to try an instrument, because in music, no butterflies are killed when we make a mistake. It's low risk.
True. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to playing some music with
Thank
you.
you.
So we're going to start here. We're going to take a brief pause to do a sound check, line check, and sight read a bunch of brand new music for you from Marina and myself. So we're looking forward to it. If you've been enjoying these weekly performances that we do, feel free to make a donation and support us that way. You can do that via Venmo or PayPal or mailing a check. Next week, we'll be featuring the great organist and composer Joe Doria.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, I don't know. I'd have to look at my calendar, but there's lots of great stuff coming up. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Karim. Good job.
Thank you.